Good morning. We recently started learning about cells, and today we are going to focus on the eukaryotic cells. Now, one thing that we talked about eukaryotic cells is that they contain what we call organelles. These organelles allow for the specialization and the separation of functions within the cell. So, talking about cell organelles. Organelle is going to mean little organ. So just like the organs we have in our body that separate functions and they operate independently to make our body run, the same thing happens within a cell. They have little organelles that act as their organs to complete the cell processes. So this is a picture of a eukaryotic cell, and it shows the organelles within the cell. One of the first things we notice when we look at this picture is the nucleus. It's kind of the telltale sign that we're looking at a eukaryotic cell. Organelles are found only in eukaryotic cells. The environment inside the cell membrane is a semi-fluid material called the cytoplasm. And this is going to be shown around all these organelles. It's a semi-fluid-like material. If you remember probably from 7th grade when you did your cell models, you either baked a cake or you made jello. That cytoplasm was the jello itself or the icing on the cake before you input all those organelles. Let's talk about the first structure of the cell that we need to know, and it's the cell or cell membrane. It acts as the boundary of the cell. Okay, it's going to be made up of a phospholipid bilayer. Now, if you remember, when we talked about the biomolecules, we talked about lipids. The phospholipid bilayer is going to contain lipids, meaning it helps to control water. The cell membrane is super important because it helps control what goes in and out of the cell. Now, we want to make sure that everything can't just pass freely in and out of the cell, and the cell membrane is going to help us control that. The next is the nucleus. And like I said before, it's going to be what we kind of identify our eukaryotic cells. It's going to be the first thing we notice when we say, oh yeah, that's a eukaryotic cell. It's the control center of the cell. It controls everything happening inside the cell. So if we look in this picture, we're going to see the nucleus right here. This is actually just the whole nucleus. We're not showing it inside the cell. It contains the DNA. You see these chromosomes here? This is the DNA. So this is where we're going to find the DNA. It's kept safe in this nucleus and it never leaves because we don't want to mess up that DNA. It's going to be surrounded by a double membrane. Okay, so you have your nuclear envelope here. It's a double membrane. These nuclear pores are going to be what allows the RNA to enter and leave the cell. And we'll talk about that more when we get to that unit. It's usually the easiest organelle to see under the microscope. So when we look at cells later today in class, you're going to be able to see this nucleus under the microscope. And there's usually about one nucleus per cell that you're going to be able to identify. Okay, cytoskeleton. Cytoskeleton is pretty easy to remember because it actually has the word skeleton in it. It acts kind of as our skeletons do. It's going to act as the skeleton and the muscle of the cell. It's going to provide shape and structure for the cell. It's going to help move organelles around in the cell. And it's made of these three types of filaments, the microtubules, the actin filaments, and the intermediate filaments. So cytoskeleton is going to give that structure and support within the cell. Okay, endoplasmic reticulum. It's a long, strange word. We usually sum it up just by calling it the ER, which makes it easy. It's the endoplasmic reticulum. And it's going to look like this in the cell. It's kind of folded amongst itself. These folds create a lot of surface area. It's connected to the nuclear membrane. And it's going to act as the highway of the cell. What does the highway do? It helps us to travel around from one place to the other. And that's exactly what the endoplasmic reticulum does inside the cell. Is it's going to allow substances to move within the cell. The rough ER, okay, rough ER kind of makes it a bumpy surface, as you can see here, because it's studded with ribosomes, okay? These little dots you see here are ribosomes, and the ribosomes are actually where proteins are made. So that's on the rough ER, you're going to get these ribosomes. And then you have a smooth ER, which is going to contain no ribosomes, which makes it smooth. And it's going to be an area that makes lipids within the cell. So that's the endoplasmic reticulum, the highway of the cell. Okay, so let's talk about those ribosomes more that we find on the ER. Not only are they found on the ER, but they're found floating free in the cytoplasm as well. And these are the site of protein synthesis. So protein synthesis just means where proteins are made. And they're gonna, like I said, be found attached to the rough ER or floating free in the cytosol or cytoplasm. And they're produced in a part of the nucleus called the nucleolus. Okay, so the nucleolus is inside of the nucleus, and that's going to be where those ribosomes are produced. And so they're going to have to pass through those nuclear pores that I talked about in order to get out into the cytoplasm or to the rough ER. So if you see here ribosomes, this is the process of the ribosomes actually making those proteins. And we're going to talk about that a lot more when we get to the unit on protein synthesis. Right now, all you need to know is that the ribosomes make proteins. Our Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus, it's always said that it looks like a stack of plates or pancakes. I don't know if I really see that, but you see it's these stacks here. So that's our stack of pancakes. The Golgi apparatus stores, modifies, and packages proteins. So, stores, modifies, and packages. We like to call this the post office of the cell because it gets all of these proteins packaged up and ready to be sent out to be used inside the cell. So these molecules are transported to and from the Golgi by means of vesicles. So these vesicles break off and transport things throughout the cell. Again, we like to call this the post office of the cell. That is the Golgi apparatus, sometimes called Golgi body. Okay, lysosomes. Lysosomes are kind of fun. We like to call them the garbage disposal of the cell, or the trash cans of the cell. So you see these lysosomes, they actually contain digestive enzymes that break down waste within the cell. So just like our bodies, our cells contain waste too that we need to get rid of. Lysosomes are also involved in a process called apoptosis, which is cell suicide. So it breaks down old organelles or non-working organelles, and it actually, if something goes wrong within a cell, this cell is going to kind of save the organism for the greater good. And it's these lysosomes that will just help break down the entire cell and get rid of it before it replicates and spreads that disease throughout your whole body. The mitochondria, the mighty mitochondria. Now, mitochondria is actually the powerhouse of the cell. So cells need energy to perform their functions and provide the organism with energy. And so this all happens inside of the mitochondria. So here it is right here. They say it looks like a sausage with many folds on the inside. Cellular respiration occurs here to release energy for the cell to use. Now we're going to get into cellular respiration a lot more and how it produces energy for the organism. It's bound by a double membrane. So you can see here it's got two membranes. And it has its own strand of DNA. The mitochondrial DNA only comes from the mother. So if you were to take your mitochondria and look at the DNA inside there, you would only find DNA from your mother, unlike the DNA found in the nucleus, which comes from both parents. So this is the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. It's where cellular respiration takes place. So the chloroplast. Now the chloroplast is going to be the first organelle that we're going to find only inside of plant cells and not in animals. So the chloroplast is found only in plant cells. And here it is. Here is the chloroplast. And if you're looking at a bunch of cells under a microscope, which you will do in a little while, you're going to see these individual cells and you're going to see these green dots in here. And that's actually the chloroplast. They contain green pigment called chlorophyll. That's what makes them appear green. And that chlorophyll helps to absorb light energy for the plant to perform photosynthesis, which is the food production for plants. It produces glucose. So we all know glucose ends in OSC, is a sugar. So this is going to be produced through photosynthesis inside of the chloroplast. It's also bound by a double membrane like the mitochondria. So you see the outer membrane and the inner membrane. And we're going to talk about all of these parts inside the chloroplast when we get to photosynthesis. Another structure that is found only in plant cells and bacteria, but not in animal cells, is the cell wall. It's found in plant and bacterial cells. The cell wall is actually going to be on the outside of the cell membrane. It's a rigid and protective barrier. It's located, like I said, outside of the cell membrane, and it's made of cellulose. It provides support and protects the plant cell. All right, vacuoles. So we're going to find vacuoles in plants and animal cells, but in plant cells, we're going to find large central vacuoles. So this is a plant cell. You see the cell wall. This whole space is a vacuole. They're going to be very large in plant cells. There are going to be many smaller vacuoles in animal cells. And they're used for storage of water, food, enzymes, waste, pigments, etc. So plants, large central vacuole. All right, centrioles. Unlike the chloroplast and the cell wall, centrioles are usually found in animal cells only. They're going to aid in cell division. They're going to look like these Tootsie Rolls. Here's what we usually call them when you see them in a diagram. They're made of microtubules. Like I said, only found in animal cells. All right, so that concludes all of the organelles that we need to know. So let's do a quick review and see how much you learned from this video. So I want you to take out your paper and just jot down the answers to these questions. And in a second, we'll check your answers to see how many you got right. So the first question is, which organelle is the control center of the cell? The next question is, which organelle holds the cell together? Which one surrounds the cell and holds everything in? Question number 3, which organelles are not found in animal cells? Which organelles are not found in animal cells, only found in plant cells? The next question is, which organelles helps plant cells make food? So which organelle helps plant cells make food? And last but not least, what does ER stand for? What organelle do we say is called the ER, but it stands for something else? Okay, you've had time to write those answers down, so let's take a quick check and see how many you got right. So the first one, what organelle is the control center of the cell? That would be the nucleus. Which organelle holds the cell together? That's the cell membrane. Which organelles are not found in animal cells? That's the cell wall, the large central vacuole, and the chloroplast. Which organelle helps the plants make food? That's the chloroplast. And of course, ER stands for endoplasmic reticulum. So go back, review anything in this video you need to, and get ready for some fun and exciting activities that we're going to do to help you understand these cell organelles and their functions. Thank you.